So the final lecture for week 3 is going to be on the transportation management system itself, which of course is the heart and soul of what we've been talking about. Let's get this up so that we have it. Okay, so basically what we're going to talk about is a little bit about how you go about doing this, the workflow associated with it, some of the expectations to get out of it, how you get that benefit, what does that benefit look like, and you couple this with what we talked about on the business case, and hopefully this will then lead us into the next. This will actually lead us into what I think is the next logical area of interest for you. If this whole idea of TMS is of interest to you, we do have a class on that, and I will speak about that at the end of this slide presentation. Here we go. Okay, we talked a little bit last time about ERP and why ERP and TMS. The research that we looked at in Ohio, basically at Ohio State, basically said that you're going to get a faster ROI, you're going to accelerate your implementation, and you're going to get a better value and get your cost savings flowing faster if you get a TMS outside of your ERP. Now, here's the caveat. The caveat is the TMS you get has to be a partner with your ERP. There really is no way around this. If you have a non-ERP approved partner here, you can't really update. You can't really upgrade your versions because this version won't talk to this version. So the TMS and that's the dominating thing. The TMS that you get, or TMSs, that is plural, that you get need to be partners of your ERP. So whether it's Microsoft Dynamics, whether it's SAP, whether it's Oracle, whether it's JDE, whatever it is, this needs to be a partner. Okay, and that is from an experiential standpoint. Okay, and I've done this twice with ERPs. I've done it with SAP, I've done it with Microsoft Dynamics, and there is no way around that. I've seen Oracle fail horribly because the TMS partner that was selected by the division was not a partner of Oracle, and it just almost brought them to the end. So just from being on both sides of the fence, I can tell you that's the way to go. Okay, so the ERP does lack functionality. What functionality? It really does struggle to look at the activity because the data itself is scattered across so many different ERP subsystems. So it's not like that the ERP itself, which you have to understand how ERPs are built and how they come together, they're disparate amongst themselves, and then they get brought together through some business intelligence and databases and data warehousing that they do. But the actual applications themselves are built by a multiplicity of developers, and they don't always do things the same way. At the end of the day, they don't develop it all within necessarily the same template. It's ERPs they're not focused on carriers' performance. They're focused on a particular activity. So but a TMS itself, a dedicated TMS will connect all the dots, and they'll give you a sense of what carrier performance is at a level far lower than what the ERP is, but at a necessary level that you need to go. ERPs basically don't support all modes of transport. They may or may not support a parcel selection, for example. You may have to go out and get that anyway. They may do UPS and FedEx, but they may not do truckload. They may not do all the things associated with digital platforms at this point. Will they ultimately? Perhaps, yeah, sure. The other thing is we get back to this whole idea that we've had of outside in and inside out ERPs are inside out. So they are not particularly accessible by other people. They're designed not to be accessible by other networks. So getting through that becomes far more complex than if you work with a third party fourth generation or a third or fourth generation tool, which has built all this connectivity into it. And through its customer base, you can determine whether or not it has what you need. Okay, so this is the business case to not stay within transportation within the ERP. There's some very interesting, there's some case studies I could tell you. I will tell you the one on SAP, which is the one I know the best. Um, SAP uses your product master to calculate the weight of the shipment. Now, so if you ship 10 boxes and each box weighs 42 pounds, the shipment weighs 420 pounds. So that's what it makes Princess documents on. Now, what's wrong with that? I could make that a discussion point, or I could tell you that that doesn't include the weight of the pallet. So every shipment that SAP generated is incorrect. It's underweight by the weight of the pallet, which is 40 to 45 pounds. So every shipment generated by SAP had resulted in a reweigh, which was a cost. And then the cost that you expected to pay was not the cost you paid because you got an accessorial charge for a reweigh. Now, once that became apparent through mining the data, why am I getting all these accessorials for reweigh? Why you start to, you got on it and it got fixed. But in its initial development, the developer did not allow for a pallet weight. So every bill that got paid was being rejected to the carrier because the weight didn't match. But it was the weight in SAP that was wrong. So that's a real world example of what you need to look at. So here, remember now, when you're talking about 1 through 4, the first generation to fourth generation, most of these systems were built around 20 years ago. My first TMS was about 20 years ago. It's called Distribution Management Systems 1000, DMS 1000. And we hooked it into a warehouse management system for routing and rating and routing 20 years ago. Actually more than that, but our system was designed roughly 20 years ago. And even then it didn't have everything we wanted and we had to do some customization for it, which they carried forward into further generations. So we're talking pre-cloud, we're talking pre.com, we are talking about a system that stood alone by itself that did not integrate back into an ERP. We didn't even have an ERP at that time. And was clearly was based on inside out. So we really struck out in a lot of ways. So this is where it all started. My first experience started back in here. It worked like a charm though for what we wanted it to do, but it would not work in today's supply chain and transportation problems. Okay, it will not work in today's in the environment that we have today. So that's why you need to be looking at a fourth generation system, and certainly no later than a third generation system, and you'll give up a pretty big chunk to go from 3 to 4. So this is what it's all about. But the value that we talked about at Ohio State and we talked about 20 years ago hasn't changed. There is real value. We got real value out of it, and we got it darn fast. And it was measurable, and we beat our ROI. And so we also, we did not, but we knew from the TMS what we needed to do back in the warehouse. So we organized the warehouse a little differently based around how the TMS could best optimize it. Um, and I think one of the other, and maybe I'll make this case at the end, but there's some segmentation you need to do within your company, within your business, assuming you are segmented. Not everyone deserves the same level of service. So different segments. So you can have direct to consumer, which is one service. You can have B2B, which is another service. You can have perhaps another service. Um, that so there are different, you can segment your business and your shipments around and make decision rules based upon that segmentation. And that's the descriptive side, which is basically you classify things by customer types, you classify things by perhaps regional locations. You talk about, you build a relationship with them, which we did with many of our customers, that said, we're going to ship you once a week. Well, once a week allows you to do a lot of things before you release the order to be filled in a warehouse. So, yeah, we'll talk about that maybe, maybe not. But uh, being involved at that level from a transportation standpoint, having that seat at that table when those kinds of discussions were going, had an immeasurable impact right here. Okay, so it's recognized now. You saw in the Ohio State study that it's recognized as being mission critical, right? So we know that it orchestrates under the order management side, the integration, the planning side, the execution side, the warehouse management side, the inbound side, all these things, and it feeds back into financial management, and then the performance side. We know that's this is core capability within a TMS, but it does so much more than that. What it does is it does literally the fourth generation systems do all this. So you've got all your hooks in place to collaborate, and you've got a whole section on carrier management that talks about performance metrics, which you can define. It does inbound and outbound routing guide management. It does all of these things here. Here's your visibility, your status tracking and automated alerts. This is your exception alert, is your visibility piece. It does all that automatically through its connections back out to your carriers. It does freight audit. So if you don't want to do blockchain, you can do freight audit for yourself. You can do e-match, or you can pay or auto pay. You can calculate based on your contracts what you owe and pay that without ever receiving a carrier invoice. Or you can match the carrier's invoice to what you decided to pay and then decide what you're going to pay and then handle the exception. Okay. So this is what happens, and these systems integrate backwardly into your ERP, WMS, and accounting, as long as they're partners. Okay, well, they'll do it even if you're not a partner, but you better be a partner. I'm just telling you, just do that. They're multimodal. They do all the multimodal stuff, and they also are in many cases global. So they'll have a component that talks about air or ocean and forwarding and all that. This is all stock capability now. So where before we would look at this and say, wow, this is really great. We never use it. Now in today's world, you're going to use this in many cases. If you're not going to do it, don't get caught up in the marketing speak. Okay. Know your needs, focus your TMS on your needs. And it could very well be that you need a global TMS and a domestic TMS. Don't think you don't. You might. So you have to understand what your needs are. And all that's available if you need it. So here's what the flow looks like. Now this is linear, right? This is linear. So we start with an order entry and we wind up with an reporting and analytics on how that shipment took place. So this is what the TMS does. It takes you through this workflow. Now we know in the market right now, we know from other research, not Ohio State, that 40% of people who were surveyed in a recent survey done by G3 TMS, which is a very large successful player in the market. This was done in spring of 17, is that 40% of their surveyors are not using TMS at all, and yet they're responding to the survey. That tells you something. Mainly because a lot of them said we would be interested in doing more LSP, managed services and freight, because these TMS systems are beyond our ability to do it. And this gets back to something we spoke about back in the financial section where we said, how is your transportation data doing for you? If you're not achieving cost benefits, if you're not achieving better service improvements, if you're not able to do some of these things, then the chances are you probably do need to look outside for managed services. And this is the same thing. If you need a state-of-the-art TMS system, because, and again, you need a fourth generation system, which does maybe global and domestic, then the chances are you're better off looking outside to an LSP to do this. Because they have already had experience in integrating with the ERPs. They have to do that by definition. And so they already know what they're doing. Plus, you get the leverage of what the 3PL brings in terms of pricing that you would not be able to achieve likely by yourself. Not that's a general statement. There are exceptions to that. I can tell you just based on the size of your organization. For sure, if you work for Amazon, you'll get better value than most LSPs will. So, again, but keep it in mind. Look at the sell side of the LSP as well too, not just the technical side, but the sell side. Okay, what can they do for you? So these are the things, and keep in mind that this connectivity is as important as anything else we do, because the connectivity, this completes the visibility chain that we're looking at. So the other thing about TMS systems are the data accuracy. Data accuracy is again, you're going to get all this data, but now you got to convert it into analytics. Well, the fact that the data is accurate gets you ahead of that game. Core benefits. This is the results of some research that was done. And you can see, again, that the ROI is likely to be somewhere between 8 and 10% of your cost, of your freight cost, you can save through a TMS. They are very easy to use. You're actually going to get a chance to do a small assignment on a TMS here as part of this week. They're quite flexible. They have a tremendous amount of power. They're easy to navigate, and they're quite dynamic. So as I said, we're going to give you an opportunity to work on a honest to God TMS system. Just do a very basic couple of steps, and then we'll come back to this TMS system a couple more times over the course of the semester for you guys to look at. Now, TMS things, as I talked about the soft stuff, there are some benefits of TMS that become underrated. The whole idea of collaboration, you can't quantify it, so it gets underrated. But the ability to collaborate here with your carrier base and take that data and roll it back upstream into your planning, it's going to allow you to to re-strategize what you need to do. There's the word. It's going to allow you to rapidly re-strategize based on what your consumer is looking for. And if you prioritize consumer experience, then, and that is a key part of your market, then you need to be able to do this, because things happen. Eclipses happen. Hurricane Harvey happens, okay? And when it does, you've got to re-strategize, because your consumer is going to say, gee, you're right, but where's my product? Okay? So it's important that you know as soon as you can that you do need to re-strategize, and that's the beauty of collaboration. So, part of your savings might be expedited freight, it might be shipping from out of territory, it could be something else, just taking a stock out. There's the lost sale. So there is value here that you can ascribe to what we're doing here that maybe you can sell internally. It's not easy to sell that. But the fact that there is so much data becoming available now, and it's difficult to know what to do with it, having a TMS allows you to get those analytics done, where for the most part, most companies and most departments don't have the resources anymore to do the kind of analytical work and the analytical prep that needs to be done in order to continue to have continuous improvement. So the TMS by itself becomes the analyst, the forecaster, and the data scientist. And they're designed to do that, as you will see, as we, not in this class, but you'll see it in the next class, the TMS class. You'll see how they do this through optimization. Now, you don't have to buy it. It's available in multiple flavors. You can get it as software as a service or SaaS. You can get it as a private cloud. You can get it, you can buy it and keep it on premise. So which version of this that you might want to do is clearly a financial decision that you'll need to make in concert with your colleagues over in finance. But there's a number of options here, including going outside. You can look at going outside can be your fourth option besides this. So there's no question that these systems can be deployed relatively quickly, but don't underestimate the complexity of the data that goes into it. And it can, because it is multimodal now, it can help you look at options that you would not be able to, you can't look at. No way you can look at all the options available to you without a solution like that. You can't do it. I mean, you can't look at paper and decide, oh, I could do pool distribution on that load. You can't do that. You just can't do that. So where is it most effective? Well, this is an interesting chart. This came from American Shipper, another survey that was done recently. This is kind of a bummer in a lot of ways because this is saying a lot of people are using it, but they don't consider it to be horribly effective. So that's a real wake-up call in my mind. Did they spec it right? Are their requirements matched up to what they want? Did they need to get it at all? This is quite interesting. So the best ones were right here. You can see this. So this is a truckload, and this is full container load ocean right here. It's where they scored the highest, followed by LTL. So, but it's even so, what the surveyor said was effective is way below what I would have thought. And so I kind of looked at this and said, So if this is the case, is it's telling us that we need a domestic and an international TMS because the TMSs that were being used by these 150 companies sure didn't seem to get the job done. So do we need that? Well, again, this is a decision you have to work through based on your own needs assessment. I can't tell you that, but I can tell you the data sort of leads you to that solution, this solution. And this underwhelms. And it doesn't match up with what you would expect. Let's just say it that way. So I think there could be a play here between domestic and a global. Obviously, global trade management figures into some of this too. So that could very easily be part of it. Global transportation being inherently far more complex than it is on the domestic side. So let's take a look at this. So if you are going to proceed with this, then you've got to match your needs. You got to know what your needs are, which means you have to know a whole lot of stuff. Okay, and then you have to match that to what the vendor is offering you. And I'll jump down here. The question you want to ask is, how do you do pool consolidations? Not do you do pool consolidations? How do you do it? How do you make the selection between Postal Service and FedEx, and how do you make that? What are the constraints that you have available to you? Do you include disruptors like weather when you're making that calculation? So anybody going into the Southwest today, is their TMS saying we can't deliver to Houston? And if so, what are you doing? How are you dealing with that? How does a TMS deal with that, if at all? Okay. As I said, look at the sell side of the 3PL. So if you want to go outside, you may find better rates for some activities would be available through the 3PL. So you would potentially use the 3PL's TMS for those categories that you prefer not to give to a 3PL. you prefer to keep in-house and use this from a technology standpoint. You can do that. You don't have to use the 3PL asset solutions or non-asset or contract solutions as part of an arrangement with a 3PL. When you look at fourth generation TMS, unlike the first generation and second generation, you don't need a lot of custom coding because these things are subject to self-configuration. You can do this yourself much easier than what you used to. And so you'll see this as we look at some of the fourth generation tools we're going to look at. But it is complex. It's a very modern design. It addresses the realities that we have today. But if somebody says this is the answer, always it seems too good to be true, then it probably is. And the one thing I will say to you, and this again is personal experience, the cost of failure is more than the cost of success. Cost of failure is virtually doom any other work that you want to do in any other area. If you go into this with too high an expectation, too high a payback, too short an implementation time, and without an appreciation for the work that needs to go into setting up the workflow. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So this, in essence, at its very base level, what you're looking at is this. You're looking at creating a shipment, creating a load, determining a carrier, tendering the load, tracking, doing event status, exception status, delivering the load, settling the invoice, right? And then the performance stuff that goes on. But look at the data that you have to have, and this is what this is. So if you have to create a load, you have to be getting this information from somebody. I'm not going to read all this because it's crazy to do that. But just you have to get it from somebody, and whoever you're getting it to, you have to look at this later down here and say, is that the best way of doing that? I mean, does every .com order have to be shipped in the next 30 minutes or the next hour? When is a carrier going to pick up? You have to match your WMS workflow to your carrier workflow. If your carrier cutoff is 4 o'clock on the afternoon, then you can continue to consolidate orders over the course of the day up to some point where you have to start releasing based upon what your productivity is and your labor product, what your system can handle. But then once you do that, then you build these loads. Now a load or what you call it a load, this is just the load for the day. Sometimes we call it a route. The route is not from St. Louis to Kansas City. The route is maybe St. Louis to Kansas City, but only for that day. Okay, so what's on that route for that day? This is all done automatically. So we're going to look at what's going on this route, and then what constraints do I have? For example, do I have an hours of service constraint? Do I have a weather constraint? A capacity constraint? Do I have an hours of service constraint? Do I have a dock constraint? Do I have enough room to do all this? Do I have incompatible freight? I can't ship hazardous with non-hazardous freight. Okay, do I have that kind of a situation? All this is done automatically for you and will generate a load plan based upon these constraints. You define all these. These don't come predefined. You define them. What are your constraints? What are your contracts? You're going to enter your contracts into the TMS. And in the next class, that is what you will do. You will actually do that. You will look at private carrier. You're competing against your own private carrier if you understand their costs. Most private carriers don't understand their costs. And then you're going to look outside. You're going to look at the spot market. Spot market is what's out there available now. Who's parked out here looking for a load to go where I want to go? And what's their cost compared to what my contract cost is? Okay? So I'm going to stop with that because I don't want to go through all this for you. But there are many, many, many steps in this and a lot of technology. We have geofencing here. We have GPS. We have tablets and images and cell phones. So there's tons of mobility involved in here, all of which is generally app driven. So you get an idea that this is why it's so complex. It just doesn't, you just don't plug this thing in and play. You just don't. Okay, so what's the takeaway? It's hard to find a single system. But you should try to find a single system. You should try to find a system that gives you an homogeneous view of everything. That's going to make it easier for you. But as long as it's a partner to your ERP or whatever your main system is, it's maybe your order management system. As long as it can talk to your order management system, you're going to be probably okay. You have to be concerned about connectivity because that's also a cybersecurity risk that you don't have. There are a lot of options out there, okay? Most of the options are built around web services and APIs and apps and things like that. Is your technology up to that level where you can deal with that? So you if you're a shipper, as a shipper, you need to drive this because this is the direction it's going. And again, in the fourth generation, parcel is integrated, including postal service. A lot of these systems don't have, other than fourth generation, don't have postal service in them. And that's a major player today because of e-commerce. So the takeaways are, you can just look at this slide right here. Most everybody's operating suboptimally because they're using EDI, which is considered to be suboptimal because it's got a lot of layers in it, or this is being managed more on a transactional basis at a dock itself. So that's what the market is looking like now, and what you're kind of competing with. So the last slide here is this. Let's see if it's going to time out here. Close. See that red dot? That red dot's holding it. We'll do this way. Okay, so we are offering a new class called Transportation Management Systems 3798, the spring of 18. And this will be a class where we have, it's 15 weeks. It's 15 weeks of assignment on, it's not classroom, it's on a TMS. So you actually will be working in a real live, a simulated live transportation management system. So very unique, very unusual. Nothing like this has been offered here on UMSL for sure. But this will be, if you're interested in this kind of work, this is the next class you should be thinking about taking in the spring of 18. So you've taken 3770. So this would give you 15 hours. I don't give you just 9 hours, wouldn't it? Give you 9 hours, and you've taken the basic marketing, so that's 12. So you're getting close to being able to get the minor at this point. So this class is brand new, and I would encourage you to look into it because it's going to give you an advantage. It's definitely going to give you an educational advantage as part of this. All right, so that's it. We're done for the week. We'll see you next week online.